That's the button. All right, it looks like we are here and we are live for another beautiful Sabbath morning. Welcome everyone to Sabbath School at Piedmont Park. I might say online Sabbath School at Piedmont Park. We are so glad that you have joined us for what is, again, one of my favorite words, the penultimate discussion on the book of Genesis. We are the next to last week, lesson 12. And between last week and this week, our protagonist has gone through quite a metamorphosis, shall we say, quite a change. We're going to learn a lot about that. So we're very excited to see what the lesson has in store for us about the life of Joseph. Joined as always by my dad, Pastor Ray Daniel. Good morning, Dad.
Good morning.
I think there's somebody here that's going to be very happy to see you in a different shirt and even a tie. So I will see if there are any comments that come through about that.
Okay.
Glad to have you and joined again. Second time that she's been with us, Teresa. Good morning.
Good to be here.
Glad to have you with us. And as we look at this interesting study, we're very excited about it. So we're glad that you are with us and that we can join in conversation with you. Now, if you have any questions, if you have any comments, feel free to put them into the chat, or if you have my contact information, you can text me directly, and we can enjoy the fellowship in this manner and learn together. We have great service coming up as well, following Sabbath School. We have a guest speaker, one of the religion professors from Union College is joining us. Pastor Michael is back from vacation, so you can stop by and say hi to Pastor Michael. And just a nice, very warm day here. So hopefully you are hydrating properly and staying indoors, staying out of the sun as much as possible. But it is a beautiful day so far. We'll see what that thermostat does to us later. That is everything that I have. Announcements to Dad. Anything you or Teresa, anything else that you would like to share?
Well, I know Larry Bucher had surgery this week, so we need to remember him.
Sure. Larry, absolutely. And I think, just forgot too that, Pastor Shauna is traveling. She is at the Called Convention, I believe, in Kentucky, with all of the pastors that are gathering from the North American Division. So that's a big event that is happening there as well. So lots going on there, but certainly Larry and the Ballou family is celebrating the life of Mary on Monday here at Piedmont. So want to keep them in prayer as well. So
I just found out who she was. The daughter of Sam Briscoe. I couldn't believe it. An old friend of mine. I wish I had known that. When she was still alive, I didn't realize that she was Sam's daughter.
Well, that must make you pretty old then. If you're having friends that have children that old, that puts you in a different age bracket, huh?
I was just a wee babe.
Oh, okay. Well, very good. Well, let us offer these things in prayer this morning as we get started. Oh, we do have a report. Carol did leave in the chat here. Larry made it through his second surgery on Thursday afternoon. He is hopefully done through with that for now. Thank you for the prayers, she says. So thank you, Carol, for that live update. We appreciate hearing that. Let's bow our heads as we open with prayer. Lord, thank you so much for this beautiful Sabbath day and that we can come together and talk about the things that we have studied and learned this week from the book of Genesis. And we know that there are new things that we can learn, even though we might have read and seen these stories so many times before, but we are so thankful that we have the opportunity to study with other believers around the world this week in this particular subject. We ask for your Spirit to be with our conversation, that we can be kind, loving, and say all of the things and think all of the things that you would have us say and think. We want to lift up especially Larry Bucher and especially Carol as he is recovering from surgery. Thank you so much for the skilled physicians that were able to perform the surgery, and we ask that you will bring him back to full health. We know that your plan is much better than ours, and we just ask for you to intervene in this instance. We also want to ask for your healing with the Ellis family, the Thompson family, Mayer family. There are several other names here listed in the bulletin, and we just ask for your continued healing power to be with them, and also be with the Ballou family as they are mourning the loss of Mary. And we just ask that not only will you provide comfort, but that we can comfort them in whatever way we have possible. We ask all of these things, Lord, in your precious name. Amen.
Amen.
All right. I think that brings us to lesson sharing time.
Speaking of
Thank-
classes around the world, I just got out of a class with some people from Brazil. We had a little on Zoom Sabbath School class. So it is neat to meet with people around the world. No, we're
That-
all studying the same thing.
That is pretty interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, do you speak Portuguese, or was it a Brazilian class in English, or?
It was English speaking class,
Okay.
but a friend of mine and I are trying to learn Portuguese.
Oh,
So
wow.
that's one of our things we're trying to do.
Fantastic.
Duolingo, you've probably heard of it.
Yeah, sure.
Very good. Well, I want to ask this question of my fellow coordinators this morning. Where does this story rank in the pantheon of stories in the Bible, in your view? Where does it rank? In the top 5, the top 1? How much does this particular story about Joseph mean to you?
For me, I think it follows most closely the life of Christ. To me, it's the closest parallel that we can almost find for so many things that happened to him were things we can recognize in the life of Christ. So I think it ranks pretty high.
Okay.
Yeah, it is. I was in the book of Esther this morning, and a little bit of Job, but in Esther, not the same trials necessarily, but kind of another rags to riches story there. And then we think of Daniel, who had a very similar story, right? He was a favored son in the leadership of Israel that then became a prisoner, a servant or a slave, and then rose to the same heights that Joseph did. But the end of the story and how he helped his family, I think, makes this one maybe even stick up a little bit more. But yeah, definitely, I would say it could get there in the top 10 for me, for sure.
Well, it's right up near the top for me, I'll tell you, because it's such a powerful story and an incredible story. It's a gotcha story where you can't even believe how this all transpired, and everything that he had been told was going to happen happened. And to think that this could all occur as a result of a horrible act, and it led to this is just out of my imagination. But that's what happened, and we see our memory text confirming it. Pharaoh, the leader of the country, said to Joseph, "I have set you over all the land of Egypt." Wow. He's now the leader of Egypt.
All because he was a problem solver who was willing to be used by God, right? It wasn't his resume necessarily. It wasn't a lot of things. Pharaoh had a problem. He asked all of his smart people about it. They couldn't do anything. And here comes this guy from prison that says, here's what you dreamt. Here's what it means. And here's what you need to do. I mean, that's all the interview that he needed for Pharaoh to understand. It wasn't some small decision. Pharaoh was a pretty smart guy. and he recognized what needed to be done to save his country.
Absolutely.
He was at the right place at the right time.
He
That was
was.
about it.
He was. As we see at the end, when Joseph finally reveals his identity, to their shock and dismay, they finally understand that in spite of their horrible action, that God had brought good out of it. He brought good out of it. Well, their back and forth journeys from Joseph to their father and the obstacles they encountered made them remember their wicked acts toward Joseph and their father, and they realized their iniquity toward God. So it finally really sunk in and dawned on them how horrible their act had been. And now, as they're going through this wrenching experience, they begin to think, this is our payback. This is God paying us back for what we did. And yet, in the end, there's an emotional conclusion filled with a message of forgiveness in spite of their horrible acts of evil, the act that they had in selling Joseph. Well, that's the whole story, but we'll take it a piece at a time. And first of all, we looked at his rise to power. It all began with what? What happened to Pharaoh?
He not only had one dream, he had two dreams, and they were
He
so
had two
similar.
dreams.
It scared him. They were so similar.
Yeah, they were. And he didn't know what to make of them. And yet, Joseph came and explained it. And apparently, Pharaoh believed everything he said. He didn't doubt it. He accepted the interpretation. And it's important, I think, for us to notice that Joseph does not call on Pharaoh to believe in Joseph's God. He didn't say you have to believe this. He just said, this is what I understand your dreams to mean. And so the Pharaoh accepted that, and he accepted Joseph's proposal.
He also knew that.
Go ahead.
I was just going to interject that the Pharaoh also knew from his butler, his cupbearer, that Joseph had interpreted his dream correctly, and of the baker. So Pharaoh had a little bit of reason to trust this man, I think.
You're right. I think so. But our lesson brings out something rather interesting here, that Pharaoh was looking at it more from the economic side than the spiritual side. He saw the importance of the recommendation of what to do about this famine. And that's what seemed to be the thing he focused on and that he latched on to. So the advice was good in the eyes of Pharaoh and all his servants. And they began to think, well, who can we get to lead out in implementing this plan? What did they decide?
It was Pharaoh that decided it, wasn't it?
Yeah, Pharaoh said,
Yeah.
well, all these things that you said, just go and do them, right? He gave him the latitude to be able to do that. And you wonder if there was any input either from Potiphar or from the jailer, right, on any character witnesses, because Potiphar, right, he was very high ranking himself. So can you imagine now he's working for Joseph? So he must have had some sort of interaction there with the Pharaoh.
Yeah.
Because he was captain of the guard, right? But that was Potiphar's role. So he would have known Pharaoh and been able to say, yeah, this guy is for real. He makes great things happen. Definitely go and let him be in charge.
Yeah.
And that would have done it.
So how many different candidates did he consider and interview for this job?
None. Didn't he? I don't know that he had any, did he?
He didn't. He just said, wait a minute. Since you know all about it, you're the one to do it. So get going. And you're now in charge of this whole operation. And believe it or not, only in regard to the throne will I be greater than you. Wow. I've set you over the whole land of Egypt. And then he took his signet ring off his hand, put it in Joseph's hand, on his hand, put him in garments of fine linen and a gold chain around his neck, made him ride in the second chariot. And they cried out, bow the knee, bow the knee. Wow. Sounds a little bit like what Haman was hoping for. But it
Made him
didn't
happy.
exactly turn out well for him, did it? Yeah, he wanted to ride in that chariot and be adored and worshiped. Instead, he got strung up. But in this case, it was for real. He was now over the land of Egypt. And he said, I am Pharaoh, without your consent, no man may lift his hand or foot in all the land of Egypt. And Pharaoh called Joseph's name Zaphnath Paneah. Zaphnath Paneah. Did you have opportunity to check into the meaning of that?
Yes. What was the name of it? It was. Oh, it meant food of the land. This is life. Quite an apt name, I thought. Food of the land. It was his connection, I think, with the kind of work he was going to be doing.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's some other meanings that I have discovered for that name.
Yeah.
Man to whom mysteries are revealed, expounder of secrets. And then in the hieroglyphics, it ends up being God speaks and he lives. God speaks and he lives. Very meaningful name that was given to him by Pharaoh.
Mm-hmm.
Joseph was 30 years old at this time, 30 years old. That doesn't seem very old to us now, does it?
No, and you think about all that, right? When you think of his whole story, how much is packed into that 30 years then, right? It might have seemed like a long time, but yeah, when you look back at it, you go, man, all of that stuff was not a lot compared to him becoming Pharaoh's number 2 at the age of 30. And that wasn't, that wasn't an elected position. That was a lifetime thing. Unless you messed up, then it was a life-ending thing. But as long as Pharaoh was around, you were kept. So it very quick ascension and something that was had long impacts for him.
It did. There's a verse that we won't study today. I don't know if we'll even cover it before the quarter is over. There arose a Pharaoh that knew not Joseph. And things really turned around for God's people after that Pharaoh took over. But as long as this Pharaoh was around, he knew Joseph. Believe me, he knew Joseph.
He did. And it says Joseph, I just checked in Genesis 50, it said Joseph lived 110 years. So if you think having that job from 30 to 110, you don't know what other famines or anything came along, but right, those 7 years, those 14 years, he was very much involved and even proves to be a very shrewd businessman for Pharaoh. Really got him into the real estate game and servitude. All very interesting, but he really earned his keep for those next 14 years.
He sure did. So how did he tackle this famine? What practical steps did he take?
Save up food. You better save it for later. He stored food for the people. They must have wondered why, but
so where did he
20%.
store it? Huh?
20%. They built the big granaries in the various regions in the big cities. but yeah, 20% of every year's harvest they put in to be able to have enough. So they economized what they were using. Didn't maybe export it as much if you think in trade terms, but they kept it all, put it away, and kept it safe. So right in 7 years, you had more than 120% of what they would have grown in 1 year, but they made it last. So that's kind of an interesting
Made it
thing.
last. Now, mayors and governors in our country, of course, and other countries as well, view one of their jobs as attracting businesses to their area. And if you can get Amazon to come into your area and establish a business, what all does that do for you as a mayor? Let's say our mayor brought Amazon into Lincoln, Nebraska. What would that do for Lincoln?
You'd probably get elected more than once.
You'd probably get elected.
Yeah, you get jobs, you get
Jobs.
more tax revenues,
Yeah.
infrastructure investments. It brings prosperity to a town when a big company comes in.
All right. So let's think about this in regard to our story today. Somebody had to build those silos. It took a lot of employees, a lot of people to get busy working. They all had to buy into this plan. And there had to be general agreement that this is what ought to be done. And they had to have the recognize the authority to be told, you are to build this, where you're to build this. Think of all the ramifications of that. And yet he let out very skillfully in setting up the machinery and then gathering all this food into those facilities. They really filled these things up. Joseph gathered very much grain as the sand of the sea until he stopped counting, for it was immeasurable. Now that tells us that he must have been counting up until that point. You know, how many bushels do we have in there? And finally, it just got too much. We can't count it. It's immeasurable. How was he blessed personally as this was going on?
Well, he got married.
He
Most
got
of us
married.
think that's a blessing, yeah, if
He
she
got
was the right
married.
woman.
And who did he marry?
Well, a priest's
Daughter.
daughter, right?
Yeah.
Daughter of one of the priests.
Mhm.
And it wasn't necessarily his choice, right? It says Pharaoh gave him this, Pharaoh gave him that, and here's a wife. It was a reward, I believe, but it was somebody that Pharaoh designated for him to marry.
Yeah, and don't you think it was a choice girl? I mean, that was, it was probably like the Rachel, the choice girl that he was given. It's interesting that the Lord blessed that union, even though it was not a union where they shared faith together. And of course, we don't encourage mixed marriages within the church today, do we? We try to encourage young people to say, you're going to be better off with someone of your own faith. And yet, here he is marrying a heathen. Not only a heathen, but the daughter of one of the top priests in the country. And yet somehow the Lord allowed this to happen and blessed him in that marriage and in that relationship. In what way? How did he bless that marriage right off the bat?
2 sons.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I heard and I heard this. I didn't hear anything.
Yeah.
Come on.
Got to turn up the listening. We both said he had 2 sons. 2 sons.
Oh, I didn't hear. Oh, I'm okay. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
2 sons.
Who would later become tribes of Israel themselves. So Joseph must have had some type of influence on their upbringing, it sounds like.
No doubt,
Yeah.
no doubt,
Yeah.
because they were brought into the leadership of God's people. Manasseh was the name of one of them. That was the firstborn. And what's the meaning of that name, Manasseh?
I don't know. I didn't look that up. What is it?
It's not in the story, didn't it? I'm blanking on it, but why don't you share that with us?
Okay. All right. Manasseh means forgetfulness. He that causes to forget. And you see the reference to that here in our passage, verse 51. He called his name Manasseh, for God has made me forget all my toil and all my father's house. So it was in memory of the fact that he had been down in Egypt for those 13 years, and he had been able to forget his imprisonment down there, the mistreatment that he got, all the things that his brothers had done to him. He was able to forget all that. And then the name of the second, he called Ephraim, for God has caused me to be fruitful in the land of my affliction. So Ephraim is a name meaning fruitfulness. And now he's being fruitful by having these children. And the Lord has blessed him not only with the children, but with this big important job and big important responsibility in the land of Egypt, of the land of his captivity. Well, what is God's place in all of this success?
According to Joseph.
Is this due to Joseph's, primarily to Joseph himself and his accomplishments?
No, he says in both of those names, he says, for God has, and for God has, right? That he's not saying, I was able to be fruitful, I've forgotten about it. God has caused those things to happen for him. And so he's giving God all the credit for everything that has happened there.
Seems like he's always acknowledging God, yeah.
He's always
all through his life.
And so God has top place in his life. He says, it's God that provided this information to you, Pharaoh. Don't think that I understand these dreams. I don't. God told me what the thing meant, these dreams. He gives me this knowledge of what to do about this famine. He gives me the ability to lead out in it. All of this has come from God. And is that the way we should think in our lives?
Definitely, yeah. We don't get any credit for it. God has to get all the credit, we don't get a bit of it. Really.
Yeah. Is that included in the first commandment, that we're to have no other gods before him, including ourselves?
Yeah.
We should never place ourselves in his place, but always realize that all good things come from above, from him. And so that's the way he looked at it. That's the way he lived his life. And as a result, he was tremendously blessed with being able to forget all the bad things and enjoy the positive things, the fruitful things that were happening in his life. Do we hope that others are able to see in our lives that we are able to give the credit to God and that they are able to see God in us? Is that what we're hoping?
Well, when you ask what are some of the ways, I think it's just the simple things we do in life, how we share with others, how we forgive others, how we love others. Those are the kind of things that people can actually see in our life that are going to make them see that there is a God, the reality of God out there.
Yep. And it's important to give him the glory, right? We look at a couple of contrasting stories. Joseph had great thing happened when he shared what the king's dream was. Daniel as well. He saved even unfaithful priests, right? He kept everybody alive by being able to share that dream. But when he comes into the banquet and tells them what that writing means, the kingdom's over and everybody's going to die. And they try to give him nice things. He goes, well, don't even bother, save it for yourself. I don't need that. He didn't want it. Was it Elisha too, that his servant Gehazi tried to take things for Naaman when he healed him of leprosy? He said, I don't need it. God is the one that did this, right? They keep trying to point them there, but you contrast that with Hezekiah's healing. And when the emissaries came to figure out what was the good news that had saved him, right? His answer to the prophet is that I showed them everything in my house. Right? He didn't. It doesn't say. We give him a bad rap that he didn't talk about God because it doesn't record that, but it would imply that he was more focused on, hey, look how great things are, and that led eventually to the overthrow of Israel. Right? They saw all the nice things and decided that they wanted them. So putting God first and making certain he is the one that gets the credit keeps you out of trouble.
It does. The moon is so beautiful because it reflects the sun. And if we want our lives to be beautiful, we want to reflect the sun. Now, I'm going to give you a very small example of hopefully helping others to see God in my life. I live right here on the golf course, as most of you know. And my sliding glass doors and windows look out on the course, and I see what's going on out there. Well, yesterday we saw 3 people out there looking diligently for a ball. They couldn't find it. They looked and they looked and they looked. Well, I found out later it was the chiropractor and his wife who has a business right by the Piedmont church. And he and his wife and have been, and some of their friends have been playing in my golf tournaments. And so I caught up with them, and his brother happened to be in town playing with them, and he had lost his ball. And I organized them into a search party, and we found his brother's ball. And he said, you're the man, you're the man. Well, I asked Jana, I said, well, have you lost the ball too? Yeah, I lost one of these down on the second green. And I said, well, you want to go look for that? And no, they had already looked. So I spent probably a half an hour after they left looking for that ball. I said, if I find it, I'll bring it to you. And I looked and I looked and I looked and I looked. And I didn't find it. I still haven't found it. Wish I could say I had. And yet, when they find out the time I spent trying to help, I think that will make an impression on them again, that maybe I have a connection with God, and therefore have a connection with them. You see, those two things go together, God and man. The first law is to love God. The second one is to love man. And so as we show our love for our fellow man, we show our love for God.
Even in little ways, like you say, it doesn't take much to make a person feel that they're special.
Exactly.
And
that you care.
Yeah.
Well, here we come to Joseph and his brothers. What brought the brothers to Egypt?
Well, I think they were a little nervous about coming. I mean, when Jacob mentioned that maybe we need to go down to Egypt, guys, why do you keep looking at each other? He said. They were probably might have been talking among themselves about Egypt. Had they mentioned Joseph, or were they still feeling too guilty to even talk about him? But you could tell there was some anxiety there about going down there for some reason.
Yeah.
Jacob didn't quite know why.
They were starving, right? They had to get there because the famine was great. It was everywhere, and they did not have any other way. And I think it says, right, that they heard there was food down in Egypt. So go and see if you can bargain for some of it.
So in this first instance, it was Jacob promoting the idea. In the second instance, it was the sons promoting the idea and the father balking. But in this case, it's the father saying, you need to go down there. And how many of them went down?
10.
Yeah. Well, what happened to Benjamin? Didn't he go along?
I don't think
no,
Jacob would have allowed it.
Yeah, it kind of parallels a little bit of Joseph's kidnapping story, right? The brothers go to do work that they need to do, and the one, and the son stays back. But the same thing doesn't happen. He doesn't send Benjamin to go find them, but a very similar situation that he wants to hold back his favorite, or what we might think is his favorite, at least his baby boy.
His
Trying to
baby boy.
protect him.
Yeah. And so he doesn't send Benjamin. And he says the reason is lest some calamity befall him. What's he referring to there? He's referring to the bloody coat of Joseph.
Yeah.
That calamity. That's still deep in his mind and heart. And he says, I don't want that to happen to Benjamin. So he's not going to go. Now, when they get down there to buy grain, who do they have to buy it from?
Joseph.
They have to buy it from their brother.
Yeah.
Do they recognize him?
No.
Does he recognize them?
He was so
Absolutely.
young. Yeah, he was so young when they sold him as a slave, and plus he's in different clothes and appearance is different, so they're not going to recognize him, but he immediately recognized them.
Yeah. And here we find them bowing down before him with their faces to the earth. Isn't that what they said they would never do?
Yeah.
What makes you think we're going to do that? And here we have them doing it.
Never say never.
Never say never. And so he recognizes his brothers, but he doesn't let on that he does. And not only does he hide that fact, but he speaks roughly to them. Why have you come? Where have you come from? Why did he talk that way?
He wants to make sure they don't recognize him at first. He wants to find out a little more about his brothers before he reveals who he is, I think.
I think so.
Yeah, he wants to see if, have they changed? And well, let's be honest, they haven't fully changed, because what do they say? When he says that they're spies, they go, no, we're honest men. We know that's not true. So that's not fully converted, shall we say. But they were not coming to spy. They really were trying to keep their families alive. And so they came into Egypt to try and do that.
So, but he doesn't let them off the hook. No, you're spies. That's what you are. You just come to see the nakedness of the land. They said, no, we're servants of 12 brothers, and we're 12 brothers, and the sons of one man, and all, and the youngest is with our father, and one is no more. How did Jacob feel about that when they got back and told him what they had said? Why did you tell him you had another brother? Why did you blabber that? And well, the man asked, he wanted to know. But anyway, at this point, he's just charging them with being spies. And he said, okay, here's how I'm going to prove if you're a spy or not. You go back and get your youngest brother and you bring him down here. Oh my.
But he kept Simeon back. He wanted, I think he remembered that Simeon was a pretty violent character. You remember the story with him and about him and his sister and everything. And so he kept Simeon back. I think he just was a little more worried about his character. So he was going to keep him for a while.
I think so.
They did. They were right. They thought they were safe to sit there and talk amongst themselves, because they immediately go to what they did to their brother. Right. And they say, hey, this is because of what we did. And he knows it. He can hear and understand them. but they don't know that he can, and he doesn't let on. But Reuben stands up and accepts the responsibility for what they did in the past.
Yeah. How does this affect Joseph emotionally?
Well, he
Wept.
ran out crying. Yeah.
Crying, yeah.
He said he turned himself away and wept. And he got a hold of himself and came back, and he took Simeon and bound him in front of the other brothers, and then he said to his servant, "Okay, fill their sacks with grain, and then put every man's money back in their sack, and give them provisions for the journey." And off they went. Well, end of story. Was that a happy ending? Or
Well,
did
it
they
was
have a
when they
little
got home.
snafu, huh?
Was when they got home, but then they I don't think they told him right off the bat. They kind of just enjoyed it and said, boy, let's hope this food lasts us through this pandemic, shall we say, so that we don't have to go back and have to deal with this, because we don't want to bring it up with Dad, and it's not going to be good.
Okay, well, hold on just a minute now. Something happened prior to that.
Well, yeah, they're called liars because well, they're found with the money in their sack, and that's not a good
in
thing.
the encampment on the way. They haven't gotten home yet.
No, but that one's not as bad as the second time they're caught. So I guess I was just speeding it up for our conversation's sake. But yeah, they get caught, brought back, and as Teresa had said, Simeon's kept as a surety that they're going to come back, and they just it turns into a challenging situation. Sorry, no, he wasn't kept that time. It's when it's later. But yeah, he was trying to test them and calling them thieves and spies and bad things, and they don't know what to do about it. They do not know what to do about it. They're afraid. They're scared. They get home and say, hey, we got all this food, but we didn't pay for it, so we might be in trouble.
That's right. We got the food and we got our money back. You know, what kind of deal is that? And so they said, well, I don't know what to do. And Jacob said, well, you've bereaved me. Joseph is no more, Simeon's no more, and you want to take Benjamin? Guess again.
Yeah.
And Reuben spoke to his father, well, you can kill my two sons if I don't bring him back. Put him in my hands.
Yeah.
And I will bring him back to you. Well, did he want to do that? Did Jacob want to send him back now? No.
Not yet.
No.
It wasn't worth it. I mean, the brothers were trying to do it probably to get their brother Simeon, back home, but Jacob wasn't willing to sacrifice even Reuben's sons to do that.
No. So as we see this story, what happened here and how does it reveal the providence of God, even despite human evil and malfeasance? Well, it's the famine that leads the brothers back to their brother, demonstrating how God's will prevails in spite of man's evil actions. It took all of this to bring about a reconciliation.
Sure, and they're saving, right? The son that they rejected, or the brother that they rejected, was their savior, right? That was able to come up with that. Now, God could have used other means if they had gotten along. It might not have had to happen that way, but he was able to make it happen, even in spite of what they thought, right? They didn't want to kill him because that wouldn't be good, but they probably thought he would die being a slave, because that was hard living. And so they didn't ever think that they'd have to see him again. Never had it in their mind that he was ever going to live to see them again.
No. But finally, Go ahead, Teresa.
I was going to say, well, God could have just prevented the Canaan from experiencing the famine in the first place. Everybody else could have been having a famine except their little plot of place where they were. But no, I think God knew that they needed some more testing. And so he allowed these it wasn't that he allowed that, but the brothers instigated when they sold Joseph into slavery. They got the ball rolling. Something had to be done. And so God was in all of it.
And so when they ran out of food, in spite of his strong objection, Jacob realizes something's got to be done. And we see the providential nature of this meeting between the brothers and Joseph through these two fundamental characters. It's a fulfillment of Joseph's dreams. They see that his dreams were true and meant something, even though they had mocked them originally. And then we see it also as a response. They said to one another, they used that same phrase when they saw Joseph coming. They said to one another, look, this dreamer's coming. And now they're saying it again as they see him coming down, as the brothers come down to see Joseph. So we have these two aspects going on, bringing about this meeting between them. And of course, we see that the brothers relate what is currently happening to them to what they did to Joseph 20 years ago. And they said, we're truly guilty concerning our brother. We saw the anguish of his soul when he pleaded with us, and we would not hear. Therefore, this distress has come upon us. How did they connect that so clearly? I mean, could they have thought other things besides that? Why did that come to mind?
Just the fact that they were in Egypt had brought all those memories back, I would think. They couldn't have been pleasant memories of what they had done. So,
okay. So does that say that they still had a heavy load of guilt?
Oh, definitely, yeah.
And
Joseph could see it too. By that point, he was really beginning to see that his brothers were sorry for what they'd done.
Yeah. And so we ask the question here, most of us have done things that we're sorry for. How can we make up for them? And why is accepting God's promises of forgiveness so crucial for us?
Well, if we confess it the way he said, right? If we confess it, he can forgive it. And you do not have to walk around with all of that guilt. But that was not something they were prepared to do. They thought it was their task to keep that hidden throughout the rest of the life, so that their dad wouldn't have to know, or that their dad wouldn't take retribution on them for what they had done. They just thought that it was a secret they'd all have to keep, which is pretty amazing when you think about it. 10 people trying to keep that same secret and never leaking out throughout that time.
Yeah, that is. Seems like someone would have knuckled under, but they didn't.
I wonder if Jacob might have been a little bit suspicious, though. Maybe because we said that's why he didn't send Benjamin in the beginning, because he was afraid something would happen to him. So he must have had some kind of suspicion, perhaps. But I was just going to say, how can we can't do anything about our past. We can give that to God. But even that doesn't free us. We have to give him our present. We have to give him our future. We have to give him everything if we really want to overcome the guilt and our guilty conscience over anything. To me, that's the remedy.
can we really make up for these things? Do we have to make up for them, or are we forgiven?
I think that's where people get tripped up, is we feel the need that if something's bad has happened, we need it to be paid back, right? That's the unfaithful servant in the parable, right? Don't worry, I'll work until I can pay off this enormous debt that I can never afford. But that was his attitude, not accepting the forgiveness from the king, but that he would work harder to try and make a dent in it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how we can get as well. If we don't accept the forgiveness and instead try to do it on our own, it's a losing battle.
It's a losing battle. It's a losing battle.
There is a place for giving back somewhat if we've taken something from someone, to return
right.
what we can if it's possible, but we can't always get rid of all of it.
No, you can't. Well, we come to Joseph and Benjamin. They're down now back in Egypt, and they bring their brother down as Joseph has commanded them to do. And they come in to the steward, and they try to explain to him about this money. Yeah, they say, we found all this money, and so forth. And he said, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. I knew about this. You don't have anything to worry about. And then, in addition, they were taken to Joseph's house for a meal. Take these men to my home, slaughter an animal, make ready. They're going to dine with me at noon. High noon. Oh boy. Can you imagine how they felt? The jig is up.
Wow.
It's interesting to see how the seating was done at the meal. Did Joseph eat with them?
No, he couldn't be seen with them. They were, as I said, right, the shepherds were an abomination to the Egyptians, so he had to sit away. But he knew what order to put them in, and gave more to his brother than any of them, multiple times as much. So they were impressed by it. They were probably confused, but still didn't think anything of it.
Benjamin was sitting next to Joseph too, wasn't he? So that must have made the brothers a little bit worried. Why is he there?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
They were trying to watch him so careful.
Yeah. And so here they are at the meal, and they have this present ready for Joseph from their dad. With a famine going on, they didn't have all that much to bring, a little honey and a few little things, but they brought them. They had the present ready. And the first thing he wants to know, as they come in, is your father well? The old man of whom you spoke, is he still alive? Man, they have to wonder, why is this guy so interested in our family? Why does he want to know about our dad? And yet that's his question. And then he looks at Benjamin and he says, is this him? Is this your younger brother?
Had to play dumb.
Yeah.
He knew. Yeah. Well, I mean, then you think about it. It doesn't tell, right, how long it was, but even think about Simeon. He was spending his whole time in jail. However much food they took back, he was sitting there not knowing what was going to happen to him.
Oh yeah.
Not sure if he was a goner or if they were ever going to come back, or if the Pharaoh or this high-ranking official was just going to have him executed. And so he's living in fear this whole time. And Yeah, must have felt traumatic for everybody involved.
It was, and as soon as they identified Benjamin as his brother, he says to him kind words. He says, "God be gracious to you, my son." And it was just too much for him to take.
Yeah.
And he had to get out of there. He sought somewhere to weep, and he went out and he just bawled. And he washed his face and came out, and says he restrained himself. He got a hold of himself, and told him to go ahead and serve the bread. Well, not only did they serve the bread, but they served them in the order of their ages. And when it came to Benjamin, did he get seconds?
He got 5 times as much. He was hungry boy.
5 times as much.
And nobody complained. So I think that also helped test, right? You say there, right? The test the brothers regarding jealousy. They didn't think anything of Benjamin. They were probably more scared of anything happening to him, based on what their father had said.
Yeah. And so they weren't going to do anything to risk Benjamin's safety, and they were okay with that. He got favored treatment, and they didn't hate him like they had hated Joseph for his favored status. Patriarchs and Prophets reveals that this token of favor to Benjamin was a way of ascertaining if they had the same envy and hatred toward him as they had toward Joseph. That was his test. But he decided they needed a little more testing. And so before they left to go back home, what did he do?
He told his servant to put his own cup in one of their sacks. It was called a divination sack, a cup.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
Pretty valuable.
Whose sack did he want it to go in?
Benjamin's.
Oh my lands. Talk about the perfect squelch. That's why I love this story so much. It's incredible. So it goes in Benjamin's sack of all the brothers. Wow. And so the steward is asked to fill the sacks with all the food that they need and put their money back in their sacks. Just like the first time. But in addition, to put this silver cup in. Well, Joseph's steward was a faithful man. He did exactly what he was told. And the men took off. They hadn't been gone long, and Joseph said to the steward, "Go out and find them and say, why have you repaid evil for good?"
They weren't bright. Again, I don't know if it was an honor thing, but if that had happened to you, where you found your money in your sack, you might be tempted to open it up and look again, right? The second time, just to make sure. But if they were afraid they might offend him by doing that in his presence, you may just wait till you get out of sight and then check it out. But they were dumb enough just to go on their way, and
They were anxious to get out of there, probably.
Yeah, oh, I'm sure they were. So he goes out and accuses them, and they say, "What are you talking about? What makes you think we would do such a thing as that? We brought the money back. But if it can be found in any of our bags, whoever has it, let him die, and we'll also be your slaves." No, the steward says, no, just the one I find it in. They'll be my slave, and you'll be blameless. I said, okay. So they let down their bags and sacks, and they started looking. And presto changeo, where did they find it?
right in Benjamin's. Yeah, it was a setup. Was a setup, and yeah, it just again they just felt that horror of what has just happened, and again that can happen to us when we are boastful about things, right? We think we know exactly what something is, and we're so certain on it, we swear to an oath to it, and very quickly that can be changed. It makes me think of the story of Jephthah, right, in the book of Judges. Of
Yeah.
Lord, if you'll give me this, I will kill whatever comes out. Right, just very flippantly saying that, and had to not kill his daughter, but right, she went through life without being able to start a family and be married, and a very challenging situation to his family based on that rash utterance.
Yeah, exactly. And then they realize what they have said, and they say, "Oh, come on, please don't do this. It'll just kill our dad if we go back without Benjamin. We can't do that." And so they pleaded with him to do something else. How shall I go up to my father if the lad is not with me? And I'll see my dad die. Why did Joseph?
Who's arguing for him?
Huh?
Who is arguing for Benjamin?
Yeah, who was it?
Which brother was it?
Judah.
Judah, who is the one that
again.
fled, right? Judah was the one that, because Reuben and the other ones had defiled themselves, he was the one that would have been the owner of the birthright if Joseph hadn't been tapped to do it. So, right, so he was very interested in getting Joseph out of the picture. But now when it comes to Joseph's younger brother from his mother Rachel, he is the protector. All right, he has changed. He is not worried about whether Benjamin's going to get it. He has had a change in heart. That's a very important characteristic change for him.
He's the one that led out in selling him to the Ishmaelites.
Yep.
And now he's the one pleading for a different approach. And of course, Reuben, who was the protector in the beginning, is now willing to stay behind. I mean, they'll do anything to solve this problem without letting Benjamin stay there in Egypt.
Yes.
Well, why did Joseph put the divination cup in Benjamin's sack and not in another brother's?
The ultimate test. Yeah, the ultimate test. Because that was an important thing. He didn't believe in it, right? And we're probably going to run out of time before we talk about the divination cup, really. But he didn't use it, right? He had God. He had a connection to God. He didn't have to try to read bubbles and things in the water. But it was a symbol that was used by people in that position. And so it was something that he owned. And that, because he knew things about them already, they probably thought that he used it, right? Because he was able to do some of those things. And I think when they get back, right, he says, didn't you know that I would, didn't you know I would know? Right. So he kind of plays around with them a little bit more, pretending.
He made them think that that's what he used it for. Yeah. Correct. That's what it was. We see a principle of love in Judah's response. It's the process of substitution. He was willing to be a substitute. And that symbolizes the kind of substitution that God did for us through Christ. And he did it by showing his love for us while we were still sinners. And he became our substitute. God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son to die in our place. And so that's a beautiful symbolism of what this brother was willing to do to do this in Benjamin's place to save his father's life.
I think a lot of the things that we've just talked about that happened, it just shows us that even though God forgives us, there is still going to be consequences for our actions and what we've done in the past. We can't get rid of those. And Joseph showed him that by some of the things he was doing, but of course it was for a different reason, but it did act as consequences for his brothers. I'm sure it changed their hearts even more by going through all that.
No doubt it did.
Yeah.
Here comes the perfect squelch toward the end of our lesson. Joseph could not restrain himself, and he cried out, "Make everyone go out." And he wept aloud, and the Egyptians and the house of Pharaoh heard it. And then Joseph said to his brothers, "I'm Joseph." Oh, no.
Yeah, no more interpreter. He's talking to them in their language. Yeah, the big reveal.
I'm Joseph. And then his next words, "Please come near to me." Oh, that's the last thing they wanted to do. Come near to me. And he says, "Don't worry. Don't be grieved or angry. This was all God's plan. You thought you were doing it. No, you weren't doing it. God did this. And that's why I've been placed here, to save this country, to save you and my father. So you go back and get him, bring him down here." And I like the way this story plays out, don't you?
They still didn't, right? So they have to be scared of him now. And now they have to go home and tell the big lie.
That's right.
I mean, they have to tell, hey, sorry about all this, but Joseph's still alive. And oh, by the way, he's the second most powerful person in the world. And he's asking us to come.
That's right. Oh, my. It all came out. And what convinced Jacob that they were telling the truth? He saw all these carts that Joseph had sent, and he knew they couldn't have done that without this being a true story. So he said, "Okay, let's go. I want to go and see Joseph before I die."
And how special for him, because because of the lie that he had told, he was never able to see his parents again, right? Jacob, he paid that penalty, and he was rewarded still in his late life that even though his sons had done that, he still was able to see his son, which kind of brings that story full circle for him.
It does. So we see some beautiful lessons of love and faith and hope in this story, how we can love the unlovable, how love can overcome hate, how love can restore relationships, how we can trust God in the face of the most formidable circumstances, how we can see his hand through it all, how one can never give up, no matter how unlikely positive resolution seems. We need to see these wonderful truths in this story of love and faith and hope. Well, we need to go on down and close with this question on Friday. In what ways can we see in Joseph a kind of precursor to Christ and what Christ went through? Teresa, you referred to this early on in our review today. And here we see those comparisons. In Joseph's case, it was envy that moved his brothers to sell him. And they thought that they had gotten rid of him and that those dreams could never happen. Instead, it was what they did that brought the dreams about. When it comes to Jesus, the Jewish priests and elders were afraid that he was taking over the country. He was going to destroy their influence. So they put him to death to keep him from becoming king. And by putting him to death, he became king. Just what they didn't want. Joseph, through his bondage in Egypt, became a savior to his father's family, but that didn't lessen the guilt of the brothers. And in Jesus' case, enemies made him the redeemer by crucifying him. They made him the savior of the world and the ruler of the whole world. but that didn't remove the guilt of their crime of crucifixion. Joseph was sold by the heathen to the heathen by his own brothers. Christ was sold by one of his disciples. Joseph was falsely accused and thrust into prison because of his virtue. Christ was despised and rejected because of the same thing, because of his righteous life. He was condemned by false witnesses, just like Joseph was. And Joseph's patience and meekness under injustice and oppression, his ready forgiveness and noble benevolence toward his natural brothers, was reflected in the Savior's uncomplaining endurance of the malice and abuse of wicked men, and his forgiveness, not only of his murderers, but all who come to him confessing their sins and seeking pardon.
There's one more thing that could have been added.
Okay.
The times when Joseph wept.
Yeah.
We saw times in Christ's life when he wept too.
Yes.
Go back and look for him.
We're going through, sure. Absolutely.
Great point.
Well, Dad, I know you need to log off, right? Because you're trying to get somewhere. So we'll let you say goodbye, and we'll go ahead and wrap it up here this morning then.
All right.
But thank you so much for sharing all of those points, and we really appreciate that from you, and we'll see you in a little bit.
All right. Thank you. Goodbye.
Yeah. Bye-bye. We're not logging off, but you can leave the Zoom if you want. There he goes. All right.
Oh.
Sorry, he has get himself to church on time to be part of the service. So,
I see.
But, I mean, that was those things that he was sharing were what you were saying, right? Joseph's life very much aligns with the life of Christ, right? So many of those things, and that's likely why so much of the book of Genesis talks about his story. We mentioned that last week, all right, from chapter 37, I believe, onward is his story. So 13 out of 50 chapters talk about Joseph. Pretty incredible. Any other closing thoughts that you have this morning, Teresa?
Can't think of any particular. We've discussed quite a bit.
we got through a lot of it,
Yes.
but yeah, so right, revealing our true selves, right? That's the thing that Joseph finally does, and he does it in a loving way, in a kind way. He does not hold anybody accountable. I mean, that's the amazing thing. As we'll see next week as we close out Genesis, they're still not convinced that he's not going to have it out for them when their dad is dead. Right? They're still they've repented. They feel bad for it, but they still think that there is something they're going to have to pay for. Mm-hmm. And that's, again, when we carry around guilt and we don't fully let it go, it is something that Satan can use to weigh us down and just keep us from having that freedom that God gives. I think, I heard it quoted this week with one of the Sabbath commentators saying, right, don't spend as much time telling God about your problems as you do telling your problems about your God. And let him take it for you. And that is a burden that he can take, right? Resentfulness, anger, jealousy, pride, anything is something that he can help us deal with, and he can help us not only deal with it but conquer.
Many times we have to go back to God for him to reassure us too. We're kind of like those brothers. We need reassurance more than once, so don't feel bad to come back to God as many times as you need to.
Absolutely, and he is willing to do that and to provide that to us, isn't he? Fantastic. Well, thank you, everybody, for being part of our class this morning. Thank you, Teresa, for joining us. I really enjoyed having you, again, part of the conversation. And if I ask, would you be able to close with prayer for us this morning?
Sure. Our dear Heavenly Father, we're so thankful for our time here with each other, and pray that the thoughts that were brought out today would give us more food for thought, and that we can draw closer to you and experience more of your loving forgiveness toward us. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen. Well, we hope to see you again next Sabbath as we have another great lesson to finish out this quarter. And right after this, you will see the church service broadcast live on the same channel. So we hope you join us for worship in just a little bit, and again in study. Have a wonderful, blessed Sabbath, and we will see